Hi.
Well, with the exception of Adam, if you have a hard time hearing any of us, just raise your hand in the back. I'm Diana McCall.
I'm Adam Bigelow.
I'm Susan Sides.
And the three of us are going to be presenting to you today on Community Gardening 101. The three of us come together from a particularly unique background in that our focus at our gardens is gardening for giving. So we are part of a Western North Carolina alliance that's aim is to support one another and to get information and resources out into the greater Western North Carolina community about how to start gardens that give. And we're going to be talking in general about how to start a community garden, but just keep in mind that we share that common goal. So I want to start our talk with you about asset-based community development, because any sustainable endeavor starts with this model. And I love that Reverend Rob this morning opened with this. He didn't actually say it, so if you've never heard of asset-based community development, let me put that catchphrase out to you. I hadn't heard it before this past October, and I've been running a successful asset-based community development project for about 10 years. So it just helped for me to identify and explain why what we were doing in the town of Black Mountain, where I've been running a community garden since around 2007, been involved since 2005, has worked so well. And that's what Rob was doing this morning. He was like, who knows this? Who has this connection? Who's been doing this? We all have these successful opportunities deeply embedded in our communities. And asset-based community development tells us to look at our strengths rather than our weaknesses so that we create solutions rather than Band-Aids. You focus internally on your community. If anyone went to the school, the farm to school workshop that happened just prior to this one, she's right here in the back of the room. You know, everyone thought that maybe she got this gift from Oprah, which really wouldn't have served her in the long run, but she got connections, and it taught her how, she said it taught her how to fish. And it probably taught her how to fish deeply within her community to make her program at her charter school such a success. And then relationship-driven. Every successful program is relationship-driven. It's not about the money you can generate, but about the relationships focused on these assets that are important. So every community has these 5 assets available to them. And if you want to start a community garden, this is where you're going to look. You're going to look at your individual gifts. In all, well, I was going to say in all humbleness, but I can't. In all braggartness, the three of us stand up here as individual gifts to our communities. The assets, the knowledge within ourselves have been such a support to our communities. And you all have that as well within yourselves. Your associations. For the town of Black Mountain, it was our health initiative. It was a board of retired executives that put it upon themselves to increase the health and wellness of the members of the town of Black Mountain. And thanks to them, the trickle-down effect caused me to have a full or a part-time year-round position running this garden. Your institutions, and we're each going to talk about our examples and how each of our gardens fit into these assets. But for my particular case, I am a town employee. My program is sponsored by Black Mountain Parks and Recreation. And I am a permanent part-time position running a community garden that serves about 60 families who rent plots from the town of Black Mountain. I run volunteers that grow food for donation on about 6,000 square feet. We grow around 4,000 pounds of produce each year that goes into the community. And so without the institution of the government, and also without the institution of our nonprofit, which oversees our greenways and our parks, my program wouldn't be what it is today. We also have land and buildings are our assets. There happens to be a barn on the land that the town donated to us to use for this. We have land as well that the town donated. All of you have within your community either 5 backyards that are larger than maybe those residents want and would like to share it, or you have town-owned land that's in river bottom area that can't be used for development. Maybe there's a church. Maybe there's a private individual, as in the example of Dig and Yancey out in Burnsville. Excellent example of a successful community garden being run on a piece of private property. And then your local economy. I love that Rob said at the very end of his long, long list, who knows their town hardware store? And you know what? That's a great example of how to use your local economy as an asset in a relationship-driven program. Because if it weren't for my town hardware in our town of Black Mountain, I wouldn't have the concrete that I need to put up, our next building project. They just donated that outright. Or 5 years ago, when I wanted sand in the sandbox, if they hadn't given us the sand at cost, I couldn't have petitioned all the parents and grandparents in the garden to go to Town Hardware to buy that sand. So all those pieces are really, really key in starting your community garden. So I hope I've planted a lot of seeds here, and I'm going to let Adam and Susan talk about how their programs fit into this as well.
Yeah, like Diana said, and like we said in the last talk, actually, they were talking about, okay, there's a missing piece, which is people don't know what food is and how to cook it. Well, there are organizations that you can probably tap into to make that happen. But first, think about your community. Who in your community cooks well? Who in your community enjoys healthy food and is really good at it? Who preserves food really well and has been doing it a long time? You can tap into that, and there may be people who do that really well and would like to create a small business doing that. So that's another thing. Maybe they don't even know that it's something that they could utilize to make some income. And I think as far as asset-based community, we also at Lord's Acre think about what are the assets of the clients? That's a big thing. What are the assets of the pantry clients who receive our food? Because what do they want? What do they have that they can contribute? Maybe they would like to run the program, run it in a different way, a way of getting food. So I think that's an asset people tend to overlook. And the same with associations. I'm with you. Like once Rob said that, I was like, yes, everyone is going to be on the same page, and the same page is creating these relationships, because that's really, I think, what the three of us are about, and what this Gardens That Give is about, is that you can have posters, you can have programs, you can have initiatives, you can have all this stuff, but if you're not on a relational level with people, you're not going to know what their assets are, and they're not going to feel comfortable sharing that with you or utilizing them for what you do. So I think it's really what's going to change people in many different ways, like what they eat, what they have to offer, how comfortable they feel in their community, is just going to be those relationships. Because I can hear about healthy food all day long, but until someone comes along and really cares about me, I might not be motivated to change. So I think for us, that's a big part of how we tie in with AssetBased.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Adam Bigelow, and I work volunteer with the Silva Community Garden, which is a donation-based garden that gives in downtown Silva. And I also am among a group of people starting the Cullowhee Community Garden, which is a large-scale community garden project on land owned by Jackson County, funded through the health department. I think that, if I was out there trying to start this new garden all myself, I would be spinning in the mud for a long time before anything gets going. But luckily, I have wonderful community, wonderful partnerships that I can call on, and a lot of people with a lot of skills and knowledge that can add to our projects so that we can be in the ground and growing in time for summer planting. So look forward to that if you're in the area. It's going to be an amazing project, and I'm really excited about it. Our garden works under the idea that we're trying to remove barriers to people growing organic, fresh, local produce. And one of those barriers can be just a nominal fee for joining the garden. So instead of charging people a monetary fee, our model, both in the Silva Community Garden and the Cullowhee Community Garden, is to offer plots within the larger garden for free for anybody in the community. And in exchange for that plot, well, in addition to that plot, you'll get to use the tools and equipment, fertilizers, and all this stuff we'll provide. And in exchange for your hard work, your back work, and your brain work, we're asking for 50% donation that will then be distributed to our local food relief agencies. Our primary recipient is the community table in Silva for the Silva Community Garden, but we also allow a lot of flexibility in how people decide how much is 50%, as well as who gets the donation. We're not nitpicking. We really want to be providing the multiple levels of service that we're able to provide through a community garden. At the Cullowhee Community Garden, we're expecting to really increase our output. So we're working with both the Community Table, United Christian Ministries, Vecinos, which provides food relief for our Hispanic community, and made just another connection Wednesday night with another local food pantry. I think, starting it from assets, everybody can see the needs. Everybody can see the bad things that are, or the negatives in their community. That's easy. That's a biological protection, so you can tell the difference between a shrub and a panther jumping out at you. You need to be able to see the bad things stand out from the background. But what's more difficult is finding those good things that blend in and are working well, because if something is working well, it doesn't pop out from the background. So that takes a little bit more effort. I could sit up here and name a couple of assets for my garden, but if I got a group of people together and we all started shouting out and feeding off ideas, together we would come up with better list of assets. And so when you apply that to your community, the more people you involve in decision making, the more people you involve in the planning from the ground up, from the moment you start, the better and more local resilience you'll have built into your project. It definitely takes individuals. We're 3 individuals standing up here. We do a lot of physical work. We do a lot of sitting behind a computer typing and doing all kinds of things, but we are a part of a community, and we wouldn't be able to do it if it was just us, if it was just Susan running the Lord's Acre, or Diana with Dr. John, Dr.
John Wilson.
Dr. John Wilson, Community Garden Black Mountain. And so when you are able to identify assets in your community, you'll start to see that the relationships are reciprocal. They work in both ways. This is a diagram of an asset map. And you can take this idea home with you in your brainstorming sessions, and you start by filling in these outer boxes. You start with your project, whatever that school garden, church garden, community garden, a garden that gives, anything, that's your center, because that's what you're there doing. But when you start adding in some of the assets into this space, you're going to see that these arrows work in both directions. And that is so totally true. Like one of my assets for the Cullowhee Community Garden is I'm in walking distance to Western Carolina University, which means I'm in walking distance to a large potential volunteer pool, both skilled and unskilled. And believe me, I'm going to use that resource great. That provides me with labor and volunteer hours and that connection. But what do we provide them? Educational outreach. A lot of students have a component where they have to do service, or maybe they got in trouble and they have to do service. We're happy to provide that service to them. And it is every asset and every community relationship. Try to work as hard as you can to recognize what it is that you can offer them and what they can offer you, and highlight that, because that's how community is developed. Really.
It's important to recognize too that when you're going to fill in this asset map, you're going to try and hit at least one of each of these areas so that you're really expanding yourself into your community. Because what happens is that the effects of each of these assets, when worked together in a reciprocal partnership, like say a community garden, they become multiplied. The other important piece here is to recognize who you are right now. What hat are you wearing as you are thinking about starting a community garden? Are you the community organizer who's coming into a community and assisting them in starting a community garden? Or are you the member of that community who wants to see a community garden? Because there's an important role difference there, because if you're the community organizer coming in and you also have other projects going on, you want to make sure that as you are stepping into that community, that you do nothing for them that they could not do for themselves. Do nothing for them that they could not do for themselves, okay? And even if you are that member of that community, again, make sure that you are not creating the what if I get hit by a bus phenomenon. You got me? If you get hit by a bus, tomorrow will your community garden still keep running? Will this program, will this idea still happen? So don't make yourself the head of, the only captain of the ship. Make sure that there's a number of people on board with you. So we're going to move on to next discussing funding, because even though we've said like it's all relationship driven, you do need some money to get this thing off the ground, right? And then we're going to move on. Our last section of the talk is going to be on essentials, which Adam has listed, and then finally we'll open it up to question and answers. Okay? So I'm going to start a little bit and just talk. We're each going to just talk to you about our individual relationship to fundraising, because even though we all have Gardens That Give, we all have very different and unique programs, which is great. We have numerous members in the Alliance That Gives, and each of them has a different story, because every community and everyone that fills that community is different. So in the community garden, it was founded by Dr. John Wilson, and that's why it's named after him. It was formerly the Black Mountain Community Garden. And Dr. John will turn around 97, 98 this coming May. So when I started working with him in 2005, do your math, he was already in his late 80s. And his wife said to me the first time she met me a few months into my volunteering at the garden, "I see you're trying to keep up." That is the kind of man that was my mentor and the person I worked with, and why the garden is now named after him. He managed to operate the garden on a shoestring budget. He basically, I think, those first couple of years, he maybe asked for a couple $100s to run the community garden. He was out there 40 hours a week, growing starts in his personal grow lab down in his workshop, and so the garden was able to start running with very little. And he was the sort of person who knew how to turn trash into useful resources and materials. Literally, like we had pie plates out there for the corn to keep the crows away, and yogurt cups was what he started the plants in. But when I came along, I also saw, like I think a lot of community members saw, that the garden wasn't very beautiful. It was a trash pile. There was poison ivy here. There was privet and exotic invasives there. And there was all of Dr. Wilson's tools, which were essentially trash to the regular viewer, lying around the edges of the garden. And I recognized that this was a gem for this town, and that if we could grow it, we could have something really amazing. So within 2 years, we had a grant from the state of North Carolina Health and Wellness. And what we did was we appealed to the grant funders who, find what the big story is right now and see if you can appeal to that story, because that's what grant writing is telling your story. And we wrote the story that we had, 50% childhood obesity in the town of Black Mountain. And it's the real thing. We follow the standard statistics, 51% on free or reduced lunches, and so on and so forth. We are, we're all in this room together. We all know these statistics. And so we said, look, we've got this successful operating community garden, and we can tie it in and be a support system to start a school garden. And the, grantees loved this vision, and they granted us this program, the money, to start it. But what was more important, and similar to Mary Jo in the back of the room, it wasn't so much that they gave us money, but they gave us technical assistance. They met with us and talked with us almost every week, definitely monthly. By 2.5 years, we managed to stretch the grant to 2.5 years. It was given to us for a full 2 years. We had doubled the community garden size. We had tripled our volunteer base. We had tripled the amount of food that we were producing out of the community garden. And we had every class getting a nutrition education or gardening education program in their grade. And we had after-school garden program. And we had gardens at on every piece of spare land we could find. And so by that point, the town of Black Mountain recognized what we had done, and they rolled over our salaries for those 2 positions into their town budget. So I'm now standing before you as a town employee, a permanent part-time town employee running our program. And we use interns now to run our school garden program. All the rest of the stuff that I do, I still look for grants to buy the 100 fruit and nut trees that I've purchased over the last 2 years, the native and medicinal plants and things like that. So to get your garden up and going, it takes a good story. You need to know what your vision is, you need to know what your mission is, so that you can appeal to someone either in your community that has the funding, or to a regional, statewide, or national grant. Because it doesn't take a whole lot to get going. And as I definitely have realized, and Mary Jo shared in her talk, it's really about, do you know how to do what you're doing sustainably? You just need a little bit of a nest egg to get you going, but it's then this stuff that keeps it going.